Hello friends, in the previous videos we talked about cost of debt and cost of preference shares. But when we think of the capital structure of a company, it comprises of different aspects, and one of the most important and significant vital part of the capital structure is equity shares. We cannot imagine a capital structure without equity shares, right? But the prominent question which comes to our mind is how to calculate the cost of equity shares. The task was very simple when we talked about debt or when we talked about preference shares. For debt, the cost was fixed in nature in the form of interest. Similarly, the cost was fixed even for the preference dividend. But what to do when it comes to equity? Because equity shareholders, their reward is fluctuating in nature. The dividend which is paid to equity shares varies. It fluctuates, which makes our task very, very difficult as to how should we calculate the cost of equity. Remember one thing, when there is nothing stagnant and fixed, what determines the cost is the expectation. So here, expectation of the equity shares will help us determining the cost of equity, and therefore we can calculate the cost of equity considering two aspects. The first aspect which we can consider is calculating cost of equity, that is KE, without growth. The another aspect which we can focus on will be cost of equity KE with growth. Now, as I said, expectations determines the cost of equity. So let's think of how to calculate the cost of equity. If I have to calculate cost of equity without growth, then how are we going to calculate? The formula is very simple. What is the reward to the equity shareholders? Dividend. So D1 divided by P0. What is D1? D1 stands for the expected dividend. D1 stands for the expected dividend of the shareholders. Now, why have I not written just dividend? Why have I written expected dividend? What does that mean? Let's say a company is giving 10 rupees as dividend on equity shares. Yeah. So 10 rupees is what the company is going to give. But the equity shareholder is going to expect that over a time period, over a year, the company is going to grow. And with the growth of the company, the expectation of shareholders will also grow. So let's say that the expected growth is 12%. So company is offering 10%, 10 rupees as the dividend. So expected growth is 12%. So you'll have to add the expected growth margin to arrive at the expected dividend. Similarly, what is P0? You can see in the denominator it's written P0. P0, just like the cost of debt, just like in calculation of cost of preference share, P0 stands for amount received by issuing equity shares. So let's say the face value of equity shares was 100. The floating cost or discount incurred is 20 rupees. Then what is the P0? It's 80. Do not commit the mistake of writing 100 in amount received. That is the face value, but after the flotation cost, what the company is receiving is to be written in the price of equity shares received. Okay, so the formula is very, very simple. And here when we talk about the price, what we are referring to, we will be specifically mentioning the current market price of shares. So point to be noted, in P0 we write the current market price, dividend YD1 because it is D0 plus the expected dividend of the shareholder. Coming to KE with growth, how do we calculate cost of equity with growth? So the formula remains the same. You need to calculate the D1, that is the dividend plus the expected dividend divided by P0, market price of the equity plus G. G stands for the growth rate, whether following the industry trend, a growth rate will be determined and will be used for calculating cost of equity with growth. So as you can see, there is a clear-cut difference over here. There is no plus G because here we are calculating cost of equity without growth. Here why have I written plus G? Because here we are calculating cost of equity with growth. And take one tip from me, my dear friends. All the students get confused between what is equity And what is equity share capital? Remember, equity is a broader term. Equity means owners fund, proprietors fund, shareholders fund. It includes equity shares, it includes preference shares, it includes reserves, plus profit, minus losses, minus fictitious assets. And equity share capital is just a part of equity. I hope you are clear with the explanation of how to calculate the cost of equity.